Hello everybody, my name is the Veggietales, and welcome to my biggest video to date. But it's not going to be, and this is only going to be part one of a huge series. Talking about every single episode of Veggietales. This one is going to be the main series, which is 1993's Where's God When I'm Scared to 2015's Noah's Ark. The next videos will be... I will do a few smaller videos in between this one and the next one, but the next one will be covering the 3-Point Penguin series, which is shorter, so thankfully, that's thankful. And then the biggest one yet would be the Veggietales in the House / in the City series. Now that one's going to take a while to do since there's 4 seasons of In the House and 2 of In the City. So yeah, 6 seasons total to look over. Yeah. It's going to take a while, but it's going to be worth it. So yeah. Then after that, hopefully there'll be a lot more of the new series with the Veggietales show, because currently there's only 7 episodes available on DVD. Hopefully soon there will be more available. So then I will be able to look those over and, talk about those in a lot more detail. But currently it's only going to be this one video is talking about the main series from 1993 to 2015 with a lot of content. It's going to be split into 3 segments, mainly the 1990s, the 2000s, which is definitely going to be the longest section, and then the 2010s. So yeah, it's going to be sectioned off into 3 main sections. So yeah, there will be small intermission bits in between those 2. So I hope you enjoy this. And trust me, this is going to be a huge one. I know the recording is going to take me a long time too, so yeah, let's do this. Starting off with episode 1, Where's God When I'm Scared? Or how a lot of people say, Where's God When I'm Scared? It's obviously to emphasize the lesson, which this one is handling fear. This DVD is actually a 10-year anniversary edition. The 15th anniversary edition of this, which actually has an interesting version of the first Silly song, which I will cover in a little bit. So, this episode is split into a few different segments, starting off with a countertop scene, a Bob and Larry reading us the letter from a kid, which this one, the letter is really big to show that the vegetables are really small. They did that in a few of the earlier episodes, but not really much later on. And also in this episode, you can tell Larry's voice is very different. It's a much more lower and doopy instead of the high-up voice that he usually does. So yeah. And Bob's voice is a little lower too. You can slightly tell that his voice gets higher and higher, a bit higher as the series progresses, but yeah, that's how the voices are. So the first story is of Junior Asparagus in Tales from the Crisper. Basically, in this one, he gets scared from a movie, Frankencelery, and Bob and Larry just suddenly appear in his room to tell him not to be scared. It's a pretty simple first story, but has some pretty decent humor too. With Larry's first doing the message that goes in with angels in the story of Jesus' birth. That's such a good joke. Larry's like, don't be afraid for a great times, great joy with all people, front to you. And then Mom's like, wrong story, Larry. So yeah, that's definitely a good bit in the first one. And all in all, the first segment is pretty good, with a great song in it too, God is Bigger. This is something you're going to hear me say a lot in Veggietales, but the music is spectacular. Almost all the episodes have at least one musical number in it, and all of them are always so good. I can't actually really think of one episode that doesn't have a musical number in it in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, they all have one in some way, shape, or form. But anyways, so yeah, that's the first segment. Then it goes to the silly songs with Larry, which, as I mentioned very early on in this segment, that it is slightly different in this one. In this one, the actual singing part is re-recorded, which shows Larry's new voice, which is like so vastly different. You can clearly tell the difference in the voice. Like, it goes from the Water Buffalo song to Everybody's got a water buffalo. It's like so sudden, like, whoa, that is so different. And this DVD actually is the only episode that has that new version. All the other versions, even much later on in the various silly song countdowns, they all use the normal version. It's weird, but very fascinating piece of media there. Then we get the last story, Daniel Lion's Den, which is a pretty faithful retelling of Daniel Lion's Den, but as a musical, with the three scallions first appearing in this episode as the wise men. Which, it's a pretty good story, and has a really good villain song, Oh No, What Are We Gonna Do? It's really catchy. All the music in this episode is super catchy, very memorable, simple but good. And the lesson in fear is pretty good too. It just ends with a simple countertop segment with lesson, the verse being, do not be afraid, for I am with you. And there's a simple message, but it's a really good one for this first episode. Really solid, really good, and one that I really do suggest you take a look at if you want to take a look at the full series. But this isn't the only one I will suggest. I will actually get to that at the very end, like which few episodes I would fully suggest if you want to get really into the series. So now let's move on to the next episode. Now the next episode is episode 2, God Wants Me to Forgive Them. This one is about forgiveness. And this one is actually when they start to change up the formula a tiny bit with how they tell the stories. The first one being The Grapes of Wrath, where Larry is telling the story of how Junior, Larry's telling the story of The Grapes of Wrath, and it's about Junior, these cranky grapes getting, upsetting Junior by saying these mean things to him. They say sorry, and Junior learns that he has to forgive them. And what makes this really interesting is that the characters in this segment interact with Bob and Larry as the narrators. It's a pretty interesting storytelling device, and it's just a really interesting first segment. It's a pretty solid one, but it's fairly simple for this first one. The Grapes of Wrath song being pretty good, but yeah, it's fairly simple. There's some decent little bits of slapstick humor in it, but it is not as good as the first one, to be honest. But definitely a solid first segment. The next one is, instead of a silly song, we have the Forgive-O-Matic. Yeah, this is the only episode that has a different segment instead of a silly song. There are other episodes that don't have silly songs, which we will get to those later on, and those are for good reason. But this one, like, just has a completely different segment. And it's basically this infomercial for this really crappy device called the Forgive-O-Matic. And it's basically this device to cure your sins, even though it literally does nothing, really. And it's actually having a pretty good little message with forgiveness that, you know, for God to forgive our sins, we don't have to do anything special. We don't need a special machine. We just need to pray and ask Him for forgiveness, and He will. Pretty simple. And that is a pretty good solid message. And I must admit, this segment is also pretty funny too. Like, like, do you remember that time where you put your little sister's teddy bear in the food processor and told him it was eaten by a bear and eating lizard? That was really bad. It was like a weird sense of humor, but pretty decent. It even has the first bit of sort of like a running reference, running gag within the series. Ginzu steak knives. It is a pretty good little mid-segment. Now into the last one, which is Larry's Lagoon. It's a parody of Gilligan's Island with Larry as Gilligan, Bob as the skipper, Archibald and his wife as the millionaire's wife, and Dad Asparagus as the professor. They actually make a good joke on why they didn't have Ginger and Marianne. They go, "Oh, wasn't it that movie star and that other girl? Yeah, but they canceled." That's like such a good little joke in there. That's why they didn't have those two characters. You know, because they didn't have any other characters really. So yeah. In this one, Larry accidentally smashes their boat and ends up landing them on a desert island where after Larry says sorry, Bob says sorry isn't good enough. Which Larry then has that connected to that he's not good enough. In which I really must admit, I really like that connection there. It really was what started. It's really what starts in the series with what I have personal sort of theory with Larry, that he is on the autism spectrum. That may be a video for another day, but yeah, he takes it as that he's not good enough. For him saying sorry isn't good enough, meaning that he's not good enough. So he decides to run away, and in the morning, Bob and the rest of them are looking for him, and so that he said sorry, he really meant it. So that really should have been enough, and that they should forgive him. And it's like just a pretty solid final segment, pretty funny. And the song in it, the Lagoon song, or the Forgiveness song, is also pretty good. It ends with another little countertop scene and another little verse. And it's just, all in all, fairly decent episode. Now let's move on to episode 3. This next episode is episode 3, Are You My Neighbor? This one is very interesting because the second story actually has some pretty pro-LGBTQ stuff in it. But the first, it starts off with a fairly typical countertop scene, but with Larry having a shoe on his head, and Larry's somewhat confused why. And Bob explains that in the first story, Larry does have a shoe on his head. Which, the first story is the story Flipperloo, which is sort of like a Dr. Seuss parody. Where it's all done in rhymes and everything. And it's just, all in all, pretty solid stuff for that first segment. Because it's a fairly simple rhyming story. Is the tale of Good Samaritan, done in this Dr. Seuss-like tale. It's pretty solid, and the rhyming is all done really good. And a sort of villain song in it, being Busy Busy, is honestly hilariously ironic. In the song, the mayor and later the nurse are singing basically how busy they are, how they cannot help Larry the Cucumber, who is stuck in a hole. Which is like, this like, you're saying you're too busy, yet you're singing about you being too busy to help him. It's pretty funny. Ends with Junior helping him, and the town's getting along, because there were like two towns fighting and all that. But it ends up a happy ending. And then the silly song in this one is one that everyone, absolutely, like, for the most part, every single person on Earth knows at least somewhat. The Hairbrush song. The Hairbrush song is like the silly song that most people think of. When people think of silly songs with Larry, they would most likely think of this one. It is in my around top 10 favorites, but it's not my number one favorite. I will talk about those when I get to them, why I really like them. But this one is still like really, really classic. Larry saying that he doesn't have any hair and uses hairbrush. It's done all this like really fun little opera type of style. It's pretty entertaining. And then the third segment, the next segment, the Gores Must Be Crazy. Which, this one, like, the message of this one, I think is fairly pro-LGBTQ. The message in this segment being that, despite each other's differences, we shouldn't, like, not interact with someone because they're different, because they have some sort of differences from us. Sorry, I'm yawning a little. It's very late. I am doing this on New Year's Eve. Like the first few on New Year's Eve. But anyways, yeah, it's basically saying that we shouldn't disengage ourselves from others just because they're different. Like, just because, like, I'm bisexual, for example. I'm bisexual and I'm Christian. That doesn't mean that other Christians should shun me from Christianity, saying I'm not a real Christian. Yeah, it's a really good, strong one, and plus it's a parody of Star Trek. It's a very fun, entertaining one with the new characters Jimmy and Jerry, being sent, like, them being seen as the new guys and the weird because they like to sing and eat and sing. That's all they really do. But they're not even really bothered by the other characters calling them weird, because they know that they're just different, and differences can be really good. Yeah, and they're threatened by a giant popcorn bomb meteor about to crash into the ship, because the ship is at a standstill. It's like very entertaining with that, because just fun, very silly. Yeah, pretty good segment there, which they end up like getting shot into it, eat it, and everyone's happy. Ends with a fairly typical ending countertop with not much really happening in that one. but still like a really good one. But the next episode we're talking about is going to be very interesting. And that one is episode 4, Rack, Shack, and Benny. This one is very interesting because this is the first episode in the series to be a full one story for the full 30-minute segment. There's a silly song, but it's just one solid story. Like, there's no other stories, another segment, none of that whatsoever. And the countertop scene is a very fascinating one too. It's the first one that has a bit more of a story to it. Larry having oven mitt on his head because he wants to be seen as cool. And you know, if he doesn't wear it, like because Veggie magazine says that oven mitts on your head is like the newest fashion thing, but it causes him to fall into the sink and get stuck down there. Yeah, it's a pretty good beginning part, and the episode is about peer pressure. You know, not falling for peer pressure, saying like, "Oh, other people are doing it. Why aren't you?" You're saying like, "I'm still not going to do it. Stand up for what you believe in." It's pretty good solid message there, and the episode itself is really solidly done. Instead of it being a king and all that, it's about the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, Rack, Shack, and Benny for short, working at a chocolate bunny factory. It's a very interesting concept. It's basically them, you know, like they're pretty decent workers, and Mr. Nezzer, their boss, says, "Oh, you get all the bunnies you want. You have fun. Yeah, all the bunnies you want. We just hit the 2 millionth chocolate bunny. There you go." And it's just, and then everyone just starts eating a whole bunch of bunnies, all parts flying everywhere, little parts of bunnies on the conveyor belt. It's like, it's a pretty fun scene, but Junior convinces Bob and Larry, or Rack and Benny. No, it's Shack and Benny, but yeah, basically Junior convinces Bob and Larry to stop eating the bunnies because the parents reminded them not to eat too much candy. It's not good for you. And it even has this like really sweet song, "Think of Me." And this causes them to be the only ones that don't get sick to their stomachs. Thinking, and Mr. Nezzer just thinks that, oh, they're the only ones that weren't lazy. Everyone else is lying down. They're being lazy. When really, they're just not sick to their stomachs. Mr. Nezzer ends up promoting them, but in that scene, there's like this really good joke between Mr. Lund and Bob. Like, "I think the tomato is sitting. I'm standing. Sitting! Look, this is sitting and this is standing. I'm standing. Okay, he's standing." It's just like, he just squishes down, stretches up a little. Like, that's such a good little gag. But then they're taken to Mr. Nezzer's office after the promotion, and he tells them that he's building a giant figure bunny so everyone can love the bunny. They even wrote a song about it, which this song actually has an interesting history. The bunny song, has changed quite a bit over the years. The original version being pretty bad, to be honest, with lines like, "I don't love my mom, I don't love my dad, I won't go to church, I won't go to school." And, it's supposed to be the song that you're not supposed to sing Yeah, kids end up singing it outside in public, at the store, and it just is like, ooh, this is supposed to be the song that they're not supposed to sing. So they end up changing it later on to, I don't love my food, but I don't love my bread. I won't eat beans, I won't eat tofu. It's a pretty decent change, I must admit. Because, yeah, it's a pretty fun, song, so, pretty good little song, with a later episode, which I will get to that one too, releasing a new and improved version, basically, a version that he made, a version that's basically him after the fact. At least that's my take on it. But yeah, after that, next day after the silly song, which is literally one of my favorites, is the Dance of the Cucumber, which is purely Bob, like literally insulting Bob in Spanish, and Bob translating it. It's like such a good, funny concept. But after that really good silly song, we get to them not singing the bunny song. So, and earlier, Mr. Nether warned them that if anyone, like whoever doesn't sing the song, he considers them a bad bunny. And bad bunnies go to the furnace. Yeah, he's willing to burn those characters alive. Yeah, this episode is dark. Yeah, they don't sing the song, and they end up almost being put in the furnace. But Laura saves them. They go through this little adventure chase, which would seem like filler, but I think it just was supposed to be a cool little action scene that they added there. And it's really cool, first person perspective at some points too. It's definitely seems like a very fun little thing that they did. After that, Mr. Nether catches them, and Laura stops the hands that were grabbing the truck before they were dropped into the furnace. But it ends up breaking, and they end up falling in. They seemingly would get burned, but basically God saved them from the fiery furnace. He was saving them, and they're not alive, and they're still alive, and they end up singing another song, Stand, which is pretty good too. But I gotta say, this episode does have one fault in it. I will get to that in a tiny bit though. But yeah, after that, after the Stand song, we get the ending countertop scene, which is really funny. Really good little gags. You would literally make a Wizard of Oz reference. Like, I want to there's no place like home. There's no place like home. Click, click, click. Yeah, it's a really good episode. But as I said, there is one little bit of flaw. The whole God saving them from the fiery furnace. I know this will happen in the Bible, but kids can be pretty impressionable. From that, they could just take it as, oh, they can do anything dangerous they want, and they wouldn't get hurt, because God would save them. Which isn't the case. I don't think that happened, but that is the one sort of flaw I did see. But other than that, it's a really good episode. Really good, really funny, great music. And now we will go on to the next episode, which is episode 5, Dave and the Giant Pickle. This one is a basic retelling of the story of David and Goliath with some creative liberties to it. Like them having sheep that always tip over, and always having these little moments like having pizza, having to give them pizza and stuff like that. It's a pretty fun little episode here, and with And this one also is the very first appearance of Larryboy, with him in the countertop scenes, not feeling special, not having a feeling of self-worth in it, so he dresses up as Larryboy in order to, feel like he's worth something. Larry is actually pretty sympathetic in this episode. He says, there's nothing special about playing a Larry, and you just feel bad for him, knowing that he just doesn't feel special. He doesn't feel, worthy of anything. It honestly is pretty sad. But he ends up, with that, Bob tells the story of David and Goliath, with Goliath being a giant pickle. Yeah, it's a very fun little episode with a really great silly song and other great songs in it too. The silly song in this one is I Love My Lips, which is another one that is really well known. And I just absolutely love the silly song. It's a lot of fun. And the whole message too of just being able to do anything that God wants us to do is really good. Having a message about us all having worth in life is really good. And it's not the first time they'll do a message like this, but it is the first one, and a pretty good one for the first one at that. So this one is very high up there. So yeah, on to the next episode. Episode 6, The Toy That Saved Christmas. This one is, their first Christmas episode, and a pretty decent one at that. It's lots of fun, has very fun songs in it, and a really good message about Christmas being about giving and not just getting. The story is simple, having a toy that doesn't work right, wanting to know what the true meaning of Christmas is. It's a pretty solid one, and I try to watch all the Veggietales Christmas episodes every year, and I always start them in order. This one, always a good start. It's fun, it's funny, has a really good lesson, and the characters are really good too. Even having, what I think is the best joke of Veggietales entirely, Mousetrap. I wanted to play Mousetrap. You roll your dice, you move your mice, nobody gets hurt. Just that one joke alone is so good. But the songs in it are really good too. From I Can't Believe It's Christmas to Grumpy Kids to Oh Santa. All of them are really good. And a big twist at the end for what happens to the main characters is it seems like they were just gonna it seems like it's just gonna be a running joke of just don't send us to Pugsleyville. Don't think about going to Pugsleyville. The bridge is out. Mentioning that Pugsleyville has the bridge out. That just seemed like a little running joke. But no, it was pretty good foreshadowing of, hey, you're gonna be sent to Pugsleyville and most likely die. But it's still a really solid episode, and a great Christmas one. One that I won't be afraid to watch every single year around Christmas time. And Buzzsaw Louie, the whole concept of him is pretty funny too. He's a toy with a little buzzsaw, a little working buzzsaw on his right arm. That's an insane idea for a toy. But it works oddly enough. You're like, why the frick would they even make a toy like this? But then you think, it does kind of work there, because it's supposed to be something that's so crazy, you wouldn't think of actually having that as an actual toy. It's a really entertaining episode, and one I send the highest regards of Christmas episodes. But this is not the absolute best one. We'll get to that way later on. But still, a really good Christmas one, and 6 episodes in too. That takes some good time to do, to be honest. Up next is technically episode 7, Very Silly Songs. This one is the very first Veggietales sing-along tape. And that's basically it. Larry is also confused about what tape they're doing, so he first thinks it's a workout video, and there's this little workout bit. And then a home improvement video, which is like a very funny little nod to Home Improvement, the show with Tim Allen. Even having like parody music of the theme in the background, which is like such a good detail. It's so funny and just all really good little sing-along one. And the third one though, like Larry being able to hit real estate with no money down. like you don't want to know how to get real estate for $1,000 with no money down? I know I am. It's like such a weird joke, but one that works so well. But some of the songs that they add are mostly from all but the toy that says Christmas. There's use of some from, well, I don't think they did any from David the Giant Pickle, but this is mainly the first 4 episodes that they took from. Even doing the new and improved Bunny song. As I mentioned in the Rack and Midi part, the Bunny song had a bit of a rocky history, with lots of people making controversies, like having controversy with it, because it was a bad song. It's one that you were not meant to sing. Like, it's the type of song you weren't meant to sing. But kids ends up singing it anyways. Even with the revamp version, a lot of people still complain about it's not the best messages. So in this one, they made the new and improved one, which in my eyes takes place right after the first it takes place right after the episode Rack, Shack, and Benny, when Mr. Nezzer learns his lesson, and it's just the version that he would sing afterwards. The better version. So yeah, but all in all, this is the very first episode to have the parts that don't do anything. This is actually the premiere of those characters, which is really fascinating. Having the characters which would be shown in the 2 movies and even so many more episodes start from this one little silly song. I don't really think they expected the Pirates Who Don't Do Anything to be those big of characters. But still, it worked out really well, and all in all, this is a really good sing-along episode. And not the only one that they'll do. Not the only music-based one that they'll do. There's definitely going to be more, and one even in the 90s part. So on to the next episode, which is episode 8, Larryboy and the Fib from Outer Space. This one is a really fun one, because it basically takes Batman with a moral to it. Basically, Junior Asparagus ends up lying a lot, because a space alien known as the Fib fell from space and ended at his house. So Larryboy is called to find out what the space alien is and save the day. And it's just a really fun little episode with a great message about lying. The countertop scenes are really fun too, with Bob and Larry having some fun banter regarding the internet and stuff like that. Larry doesn't really do all too much, but he is still super funny. When Archibald and Larry are playing Candyland, and Larryboy ends up getting called with the signal, so he ends up simply saying, "Consider a game postponed," which is just such a good line, because even though it's a very silly line is done in such a serious way is funny. And the songs in this one are really good too. Mainly it's Laura's Fall is really, really good. And the scores are just, beautiful. And the character of the Fib is pretty fun within itself, because, having a character that grows really big after you lie is really, really fun. Having his design change a little bit while having the different designs for him, it's really cool. And it's just, all in all, really fun, really good episode with the characters being really good too. Alfred being a fun butler for Larryboy. Him being really good with gadgets and such, being really smart. It really works out as a fun dynamic. And a lesson in not lying is really good for a kid's show. And the lesson does really well too. If you lie, the problem get really big and out of hand. Really fun, really simple message, but still, all in all, a really solid episode. And this is the first real Larryboy episode, so it's really good for that. On to the next one, which is episode 9, Josh and the Big Wall. And this one is Junior and Bob use their imaginations to tell the story of Joshua fighting the Battle of Jericho. And in this one, they take some very funny creative liberties with it, with the people from Jericho dropping slushies on their heads instead of actually hurting them. It's a pretty fun little episode, but still really faithful to the Bible story, and it's just, all in all, a really good silly song. But this also is somewhat of a start of an arc for Silly Songs with Larry. In the song of the Cebu here, the silly song in this episode, there was, Archibald stops him, and, apparently it was, too far this time for him. It's too far, too silly, even though it was just his vacation slides getting mixed up in with the slides for the story. But yeah, the message in obedience with God, it's really, really good, really good story, really good message, and all in all, just a really good episode with some great songs too. Promised Land being amazing, because in the Promised Land it's gonna be so grand, plus so many more. The song of the Cebu being really good too. The song of the Cebu even having some mature joke in it. Larry was just solving through slides, and we don't actually see this one. He goes, "Oh wow, forgot about that one," and skips ahead. Is like, "What was it? What was that last slide?" Anyways, this episode is a really good one, and a start of an arc with the silly songs. So it's a lot of fun. Really good episode. Really solid message and everything. With the French peas having a really big role in this one, as the people from Jericho, which also has the really good villain song, Keep Walking. Yeah. The countdown scenes are really good too. But all in all, this is a really good episode. Now, on to the next one, which is episode 10, Madame Blueberry. This one's actually a parody of the book Madame Bovary, which it's a dark book. And it's a surprising thing that they actually did do an adaptation of that book. But they do it in a really fun, creative way. And the characters in this one are so good. And being the first appearance of, Madame Blueberry. Plus Annie, the character Annie, who appears many times later on in the series. This one, Madame Blueberry wants a lot more stuff in her house. She wants all these things that she wants. And then the three salesman scallions introduce themselves with that now famous meme. Allow us to introduce ourselves. Yeah, this episode has that meme in it. Yep. But this one is really good, really fun. The songs in this one are so good. I honestly like the salesman's rap. Yes, it's called the salesman's rap. But I honestly really like it. It's a really nice, fast rap song. And even though not the best rap, it's still really good. Really fun episode. Really fun characters too. Larry being the absolute peak of comedy in this one. There's some really good slapstick humor in it. And the silly song in this one is his cheeseburger, which continues that little arc I was talking about with silly songs. In this one, the silly songs are now canceled until further notice and replaced with love songs with Mr. Lund. Larry is distraught at this one, but his cheeseburger is a really good silly song too. But yeah, it's all really good episode and really good story about not being greedy. It's just a really good, really fun episode. But with that silly song arc, how does it end? Well, that is in the next episode, which is episode 11, The End of Silliness. This one is another sing-along video, but this one has more of a story to it. This one, Larry is depressed after his silly songs were canceled and replaced with Mr. Lund. So he's basically alone in this ice cream shop, and he's very depressed. Jimmy tries to cheer him up, and then Archibald comes in with showing him that he was the one that caused all of this, and he actually makes things up with Larry in the end. Larry ends up, Archibald ends up getting this huge petition by a whole bunch of other people, and even make a little Moose Lake joke too, and one person in Moose Lake, it's weird but funny. He gets a petition to save the silly songs, and that's what happens in there, and then he allows Larry to continue on with the silly songs. It's weird that it happened this way. The story itself seems like it would be very weak for this type of episode, but it's actually pretty strong. Since the story is in these little snippets in between each round of songs, it's actually pretty good. It's the song, the story is sort of like a break from the songs, and it is a very interesting and compelling story that they even build up with the last two episodes being the sort of catalyst to this one. And I just really enjoy it. It was a lot of fun, and a great little finale to this little one, and the second to last one to this is almost the last episode of the 90s, which that last episode is episode 12 and the last episode of numbering, Larryboy and the Rumor Weed. This one is a sequel to Larryboy and the Fifth from Outer Space, pretty obvious. This one doesn't have a theme song whatsoever, and it's sort of a start to a few episodes that do that. There are very few episodes, but there are still some episodes that don't have the theme song, don't have a countertop, just starts off with episode. This is the first one of those, and this one, the story is fairly similar to the fifth from outer space, with the supernatural creature causing this thing to happen that grows bigger and bigger until it's out of control for the main characters. This time it being Junior and Laura, and a weed that was zapped on a phone line to create the rumor weed. But the difference between this one and the fib is that I actually like this one a bit more because the character of the rumor weed is a bit more interesting. Like, the character of the fib was pretty basic, like, oh yeah, just lie, and, oh, gotta go now before anyone sees me. It's just was pretty basic for that character. But this one is sort of like, the voice of the character even really shows off the type of character he's going for. It's more of a gossipy type of character. Kind of like this. A gossipy Jersey type of voice. It was really fun. Really great story. And the music in this one, also great. The scores especially. And I especially loved the Rumor Weed song. A great villain song. And this is a really strong way to end off the 90s. And I really enjoyed this one too. But also, something very interesting with this one too is how Larryboy is much more involved in this one. He is avidly trying to stop the rumor weed, and there's even this one really cool scene where he's underground, in the sewers, trying to stop the mother weed. And it's like the root of all of it. It's really cool. I think that's one of my favorite jokes in it too. The rumor weed is slowly coming in while Larry's taunting a small weed. It's like, I'm gonna take you and I'm gonna mother. It's a pretty good joke because two things. One, he's being cowardly in that moment, and two, it's the mother weed. So, it makes sense. Good, funny one, and an amazing way to end off the 90s. Now, for a brief intermission. So for this intermission and the whole 2000 section, I'm gonna be in this location here, which, just to change things up for how things look and everything, since I know right around now we'll be like an hour in already, so yeah. And like I said, for the whole 2000 section, I'm gonna be here because it's gonna be a much more comfortable spot, and it's definitely gonna be a long section. Anyways, for this intermission, I actually wanted to talk about a Veggietales movie that was canceled, that I actually see a lot of potential with. It takes place a little bit later on than right now, where I am in the series. It takes place a little bit after the first movie. The second movie they wanted to make was actually going to be an origin story for Bob and Larry. Hence actually why Larry said in the end credits of Jonah, wake me up for the prequel. Because the next movie that they were going to do was going to be the prequel to the whole show. Showing who Bob and Larry were before everything, how they got together, and how they started Veggietales, which I think that's like a very interesting and really cool concept for it. Something that they could even bring back after the Veggietales show is over with. Because the new series, the Veggietales show, is going to end around episode 26, I think it is. Like, around 26 episodes. And I think after that one, having one last movie before ending the whole series, and it being an origin story for Bob and Larry, I think would make a lot of sense. I just think that makes a lot of sense for it, and it has a lot of potential, especially with a lot of people having the headcanon of Larry being on the autism spectrum, that could definitely be shown more in this movie. Showing how Larry was perceived different, how he may have learned stuff differently, and how that could have possibly led to them getting an idea for Veggietales as a way to teach kids these lessons. How Larry didn't necessarily learn the same way as others and found it easier to learn in a different way. He found it easier to learn a different way. So they had this idea of making the show to make it as a way to make it easy for kids to learn the stories of the Bible and stuff like that. I definitely think that has a lot of potential to it. Something that they could definitely bring back for one final big movie for Veggietales, really upping the animation and everything. And the story would be much more on the softer, sentimental side, rather than a big action type of movie. And I think, after all Veggietales has been through, ending it off with a movie showing how it all started for the characters makes perfect sense. It just makes perfect sense for that to be the end of the series. And it's definitely something I really want them to do. So if Phil Fisher and Megan Rocky ends up seeing this somehow, I doubt it, but if you do, I highly suggest you bring back the Bob and Larry movie idea for the big finale of the series, because I would love to see that. It definitely has a lot of potential, and it's something that I think everyone would love to see as a big finale for the series. It's a very fun, very interesting thing to have for a movie. Having more softer, sentimental story with the characters, how they got everything started. It just makes sense, to be honest. And so yeah, that's it for this little brief intermission. The second intermission is going to be a longer one, trust me, but that'll be after the end of the 2000s, which is also going to be very long. But now, let's get back into the swing of things with the 2000s. And that first episode is King George and the Ducky. This one is a very interesting episode to talk about, since what the episode story is based on. It's based on the biblical story of David and Bathsheba. And if you don't know what that story is, or what it's about, let's say, well, it's about adultery. Yeah, the story is a man King David sends a man to war so he can get with his wife, and in war, the man dies. It's like, how the heck would you turn such a dark story like that into a Veggietales episode? They exchange women for ducks, and in this case, a kid doesn't die when he goes into war, but he still suffers through PTSD. What the hell? It's such an insane episode, and also this is also counts as some of a prequel to an episode that comes a bit later on, which we will get to. But seriously, it's such a dark episode, such a dark main story, but there's also a story beforehand, with the countertop being Jimmy and Jerry wanting to do a show, and the story that they do is this very very cheap, slow type of stage production type of thing that they tried to do. with the story being called The Englishman Who Went Up the Hill and Came Down with All the Bananas. It's such a funny part. It's like, there's lots of pauses in it, which makes all of it a lot more funny. The pauses in it just enhance the humor. Like, the humor isn't what the characters say, it's the pauses in between it, which just amplifies everything. It's just very enjoyable, with the silly song being Endangered Love. But basically, Larry watches a soap opera. Yeah, I know what I would expect out of Veggietales, but they made it work. And the lesson is about selfishness, which they do really well with the story. And I just absolutely love how they adapted such a dark Bible story into this episode and made it work. So yeah, on to the next episode, which is Esther, the Girl Who Became Queen. This one is also a very interesting one to talk about because it actually has a really good message of courage and doing what's right. It's honestly a really great message. It's meant more for girls, but it's one that's good for anybody. But there is some problematic stuff in this one still. With it being, well, obviously based on the story of Esther, there's a whole plotline of Haman trying to completely kill all the Jewish people in that story. Yeah, the original story is anti-Semitic. Has some anti-Semitic stuff, but this one is just her family, thankfully, not her whole race, but still, I think that is a better way of doing it. And instead of them all getting killed, it's them all being sent to the Isle of Perpetual Tickling, which is honestly hilarious. But also has one of the creepiest moments in the show. The Grim Tickler. Ugh. But yeah. Also, it's also has a bit of a parody of gangster movies, like The Godfather and stuff like that. It's a very fun episode, even with its problematic stuff. It's still a really good, really solid episode, and the music, once again, is fantastic. I know I'm repeating myself with this, but something I can't help but say. The music in Veggietales is always fantastic. So yeah. The story of Esther is a really good one to cover, to be honest. It's simple, and I also like how it says, you don't have to be really big to do what's right. You can literally just be a simple young girl or boy or anyone. You can just be this normal kid, and you can do big things. You can do these big things and stand up for what's right. It's honestly a pretty powerful message. And on to the next one, which for me is a super interesting one, mainly for a certain thing regarding it. I was actually wrong with that one being the interesting one. That one would be the next one. But this one, the actual next one is Wild the Kindly Viking, which is claimed to be the best Veggietales episode, which is very high up there for me. It's honestly a really good one about sharing, and has an interesting ways of telling stories. The first one being, no joke, a parody of Hamlet called Omelette. Just that as the first segment is beautiful. They do a lot of very good Shakespeare-based humor. At one point, Prince Omelette and a little kid are playing Battleship, and they go, to be, not to be, drat. It's some pretty good little Shakespearean humor in it. And they even had the Mr. Lund cross-dress in that episode, and that's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious having Mr. Lund be the fair Ophelia. It just works so much for his character. He ends up being so deadpan in it, and it's very funny. And the main segment, Lively Kindly Viking, is a really fun musical. Specifically inspired by Gilbert and Sullivan, with stuff like Pirates of Penzance and all those types of musicals. And you can definitely tell it's inspired by that with a few of the musicals, like a few songs, especially Modern Mid General with the song Look Olaf. I gotta say, it's a very underrated Veggietales song, where Bob and Larry are, as the notes are trying to distract Olaf, Mr. Nuzzer. They're trying to distract him from seeing Lyle, going back to the monastery that they just stole from. So it's really fun sort of distraction. Them listening to all these things that they're seeing when they really didn't see it. They're like, hey, look, see that. Hey, don't look over there. Look over here. Oh. It's a very fun, hectic type of song. One that it's short, but one that you can always just sit back and enjoy with how fast it goes. It's just very, very fun. And it's a great one, and a great way to lead on to the next one, which is the real one that I meant when I said I had one that was interesting about it. So, onto that episode, which is Jonah Sing-Along Songs and More, which I don't have physically because it was a VHS only episode. Yeah, that's weird. It's the only episode of Veggietales that was on VHS, and it had songs from both the movie Jonah and a few that were connected to it, like Look Olaf and a whole bunch of others. So it's a very small episode, hence why this review and this look at it is going to be pretty short. But still like very good, very fun, with some really good jokes in it. Larry with popcorn and the butter, trying to get Archibald out of his dressing room. That is pure gold right there. It's one that you can find easily on YouTube, so if you just want a simple 30-minute fun romp with some good songs in it spread around, I highly suggest this one. Now on to the next one, which is also a song one, so let's go on to that one. The Ultimate Silly Song Countdown. This one is basically the Pirates who don't do anything are listing up the top 10 silly songs, and with this machine called the Amazing Contraptionist Silliness. It's a very fun concept, and with the story so simple, it's going to be a lot of fun. All the silly songs, has like the Hair song, His Cheeseburger, Love My Lips, the person doing anything, of course. With the number one being, well, of course, the Hair song. That one is always going to be number one, for goodness sake. When is it not number one on, like, really anyone's silly song top 10 list? It's a bit of a cliche choice, to be honest. Like, yeah, it's a pretty good song, but I really wouldn't say it's the absolute best. But yeah, this one also includes the mini silly song, Dude Mushu, which is literally just Mr. Lund and Larry listing off random food items on a Chinese menu. Like, that is literally the whole song, and it's hilarious. Especially since it ends with the mobile fortune cookie that says, "Beware of grape with watermelon." Ain't that the truth? Like, it's so simple, yet such a funny little silly song, and the whole little episode is very simple but very good at the same time. It was one that is a lot of fun, and this one is actually the first 40-minute episode of Veggietales, which is interesting because I actually thought that one, the first one, was one that is gonna be a little bit later. Yeah, this one is a lot of fun, and this is a great one to watch. But something I also noticed too with this one is that one of the pictures on the back here is actually from a puzzle, I'm pretty sure. Because that's not the Hairbrush song image. Well, it is based on the Hairbrush song, but like, that is not from the actual silly song. But yeah, anyways, on to the next one, which is something that was released in between somewhere between this time when when the movie was being made and all these other episodes were being released. I just had it sit here because it's the best part in the timeline to do it. So on to that one. The Cartoon Adventures of Larryboy. This was a 4-episode little mini-series that was released in the early 2000s. And it was actually one of the first shows to incorporate Flash animation. This one was purely done in Flash animation. And I really gotta admit, the characters do maneuver over well into the 2D style. The way that they made them look, even having the sort of little lip on the eyes, they made it work really well. And especially with the new villain characters they gave for Larryboy in these 4 episodes. Well, technically, around 3 to 4 villains, but anyways, let's get to the actual episodes. The first one being Larryboy and the Angry Eyebrows. This one is a really fun one, with the introduction of the villain Awful Alvin, whose plan is to make everyone hold on to their anger using his angry eyebrows. Really fun, really good one. Next one being Lego My Ego, where the alchemist uses this spray thing on Larryboy for whenever he puts others down to make himself feel better. It literally shrinks the person that he was putting down. Which, that moral is actually a pretty heavy hitting one. The third one is Larryboy and the Yodel Napper. That one is a really fun one too. With the Yodel Napper being a pretty fun villain. She steals all the world's greatest yodelers. Larry disguises himself as one to sneak into her lair and defeat her. It's a pretty fun, pretty simple story. And then the last episode, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, is definitely the weakest one of them all, with it basically being Awful Alvin Lampy, Awful Alvin's sidekick, which is literally a lamp, just an inanimate lamp, and Greta Von Gruesome all team up to steal an overeasy egg ray, basically cause havoc. The plot is messy, and the lesson is fine, I guess, but it's definitely the weakest one out of the 4, with my personal favorite being Lego My Ego. And now, on to the next one, which is actually the movie. So this one's gonna be fun, so let's get into that. Jonah, a Veggietales movie. As the title says, it's the story of Jonah and the first theatrical release of something Veggietales related. It's not going to be the only one. There's one more a bit later on in the 2000s. But yeah, I found it interesting that they did the story of Jonah for this one. I mean, it was actually a pretty good story to adapt, because it has more of a sense of action in it. It's still having like a really great lesson in compassion, mercy, and second chances. And this one is actually purely a musical too. It's pretty much a musical, and it's a really fun one at that. It has lots of really good, it has some really good songs in it from Message from the Lord to It Cannot Be, Second Chances. There's a lot of really good songs in here. And the story is pretty simple, with it actually being a story within a story type of thing. With the story that it's within is Junior, Laura, Bob, Dad Asparagus, Annie, and I think it's Percy P. All are going to a Sweetpea concert, who's like a pop music artist in the Veggietales universe, and basically they're on the way to the Sweetpea concert. Laura rubs in Junior's face that Laura rubs it in Junior's face that she got a backstage pass and he didn't, which causes them to crash and get stranded at this weird seafood restaurant. And it's like a pretty simple but yet really good base story. And it's also fitting that they end up at a seafood restaurant and get told the story of Jonah, a man who got swallowed by a whale, or also known as the Great Fish. So it's a pretty funny coincidence type of thing. And this is the first episode fully, and this is the full piece of Veggietales content, fully with the parts that didn't do anything other than Ultimate Stillness on Countdown. That's definitely the first full one, but that's more of a music compilation one. This is the full episode, full content one. But anyways, yeah, they play as the comic relief of the movie, and they are really fun. They're really fun, good, goofy characters, and Jonah's being sort of the straight man to them, brings a good sort of flow with the characters. But also, I realized that Jonah is sort of the bad guy in this, because he wants a full place completely wiped out of the people because they're considered bad and all that. And even after he sent them the message and they changed their ways, he still is gonna be like, oh yes, God promised that he's gonna burn the whole place down, so I'm just gonna wait here and for it to happen. And it literally just ends with Jonah getting stranded there, Jonah being left by his camel, and also the best character in the movie, Khalil. This is actually his first but not his last appearance, and he's just such a funny character. My favorite line from him being, I am a caterpillar. Well, that is only half true. My mother was a caterpillar. My mother was a caterpillar. My mother was a caterpillar, but my father was a worm. But I'm okay with that now. Sorry about that, but still, it's a very fun, really good movie. And the main story, the Jonah story, literally ends with him being left by Khalil and his camel and Jonah's camel, with him saying, I'd just be better off dead. Yeah, that's literally how, and that's even how the Bible story of Jonah ends too. But still, like, for its first go at a movie, it was really good. Also, fun fact, this was actually they were actually gonna do the story of Jonah as a normal episode, but decided to make it as a movie instead. So yeah, fun little fact there. Yeah, it's a really good movie, and just a good one, and we're pretty early on in the 2000s, so, and with the first movie being good, you only wish for it to go up, even though at this time, Veggietales did go bankrupt and have a whole bunch of financial problems. If you want to know more about that, I would suggest you see the video by Saberspark, what happened to Veggietales, which I will link down below. But so now that's done, on to the next one, which is the second Christmas one, and it's the second Christmas one, and that one is The Star of Christmas. This one is the second Veggietales Christmas episode, and it's basically about Bob and Larry as Cavis and Millward. Bob as Cavis and Larry as Millward. They want to put on this big show that would show people the true meaning of love, show people how to love. It's honestly a really good concept. And they want to make the show big with lots of lights to make it seem like more important and more flashy, so it catch people's eyes more. And it's honestly like a pretty good message. I really like the message in here, and it's also absolutely hilarious with the whole scene of them borrowing the star. It's so hilarious. Yeah, they hear about this artifact called the Star of Christmas, where and they try and steal it in order to have it in the show, so they can get a crown prince on and everything. It's very funny. The whole scene of them going into the church to steal it is absolutely hilarious, with Moira the Destroyer and everything. It's just such a funny, humorous part of the episode. And all in all, it's just absolutely great, with a wonderful message and a wonderful monologue by the character Charlie Pincher, which is actually his debut episode, but not the last time we'll see him either. And all in all, it's an amazing episode, one I would definitely highly suggest you watch, especially around the festive times. So with that, on to the next one. The Wonderful World of Autotainment. This here is purely a classic, mainly because of the big meme that came from it, with, in the future, entertainment will be randomly generated, basically predicting most meme humor that's nowadays. Really, it's an amazing episode just because of that alone. Just because of that alone, that it created that big meme, basically predicting internet humor. This episode, that alone just brings this episode just high praise. And it's surprising too, because this episode is one of the ones that people are not that big a fan of usually. Honestly, I love it. I found it to be really hilarious, and even had the characters, the Ventrilomatic and Rusty, originally appearing in 3 Twin Penguins, which we will cover. But, the characters returning for this one as as the main sort of host of the future is very funny. And it's a very funny show, a very funny episode. And the songs that they have in it are really good. Most of it just like cover songs of like Zacchaeus, There's Hole in the Bottom of the Sea, Modern Major General, Eric Canal, a few others. But it even has an original song called My Day, which is absolutely one of my favorite songs in the series. And it also has these two little shorts called Lunch and Binky the Opera Singer. Binky the Opera Singer is basically about this opera singing aardvark. It's very quick and very short, but very funny. And Lunch is basically a short little parable inspired by a verse from the Bible. It's very interesting, a little short, all silent, but the music is great in it, and it's very silly, very funny. All in all, really great episode. Even though it's not highly liked, I suggest you go check it out on YouTube or something, because I highly suggest it. It's honestly pretty good. And with that, on to the next one. The Ballad of Little Joe. This one is such a great one, too. In the 2000s, there was just a big spike in the quality of these episodes, I must admit. But this one is a really good one, it being a retelling of the story of Joseph from the Bible, being done in a nice creative way, being done in a Western, with a lot of references to Bonanza, Little House on the Prairie, a whole bunch of other little Western shows, like classic Western shows. It's honestly like really great how many little references they put into these episodes. It's honestly so good. And them having more Western style music in it really does spice up some of the music that they've done. And they also do that a lot in these later episodes too, in these 2000s episodes. Really change up the type of music that they do in each one. This one is so good. Such a good, strong episode. And the message is about facing hardship, which is a pretty good message. Basically saying like, even though stuff is going bad, it's not the best. Things aren't going the best for me. I can handle through it. It's honestly a really good message, and one I very much so highly suggest. And the silly song in it, Belly Button, is an instant classic. I mean, it's a parody of boy bands like NSYNC, which, I do have a pop figure thing over there of them. But, like, parody of boy bands like NSYNC, Meatloaf, and all that. It's like, so... There's like so many little boy band parody stuff that they do in it, and it's so funny. And it's also like so catchy too. Baby, he needs to tell you something. Yeah, all in all, just a really great episode. It's rudeness and tuneness after all. But yeah, with that, on to the next one. An Easter Carol. And this one is a sequel to The Star of Christmas, with Bob and Larry playing Cavus and Millward again. But this time it's an Easter Carol parody with Larry's Uncle Nezer being Ebenezer Scrooge, in this case, Ebenezer Nezer, which is perfect. Like, it's a perfect use of the character and the name and everything. It's absolutely perfect. So after, in the last one, they burned down his theater, so now they've been working at his factory to repay it, and Easter's coming. He's planning to destroy the church in order to build this big attraction called Easterland. Basically, so he could keep the spirit of his grandmother forever, basically, because he's been sad ever since she passed, which is like really dark, but really good motivation for the character. Yeah, he's been mourning regarding her, and wanting somebody to sort of still keep her alive, and it's honestly a beautiful, a beautiful concept. Yeah, this little character named Hope, played by Rebecca St. James, is basically shows him his past and everything, showing him what the true point of Easter is and everything. It's like, it's honestly a really great and beautiful episode. And the song Hope Song in it is like, it's so amazing, especially the ending. For all who mourn and grieve, death will never be the end if you just believe. There's like, it's so beautiful. Like, you saying that you could still keep the person you lost in your heart, and that's the way you can keep them forever without having to do something drastic. It's quite beautiful, and I absolutely love this episode. But with that, on to the next one. A Snoodle's Tale. This one I absolutely love, mainly because of the message of self-worth. With people of the LGBTQ community, this type of message is absolutely important. And it's done in multiple ways in this episode, with the first story being a parody of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde called Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Sly. It's actually one of the creepier segments, but it's intentional and it's like really good at it. Yeah, in the story, basically this character Dr. Jiggle disguises himself as this disco dancer, Mr. Sly, in order to be seen as someone different and not jiggly while he dances, because he's afraid people will laugh at him. And he learns basically that he doesn't have to wear that type of get-up in order to enjoy dancing. That he can just enjoy it, and his friends will love it. His friends love how he is. He doesn't have to change himself in order to be someone different. And the main story, A Snoodle's Tale, is basically Dr. Seuss parody, and it's quite a beautiful story about this young Snoodle who basically goes on this journey because he constantly gets told, you're puny, you're ugly, you're not all that smart, you can't use your wings, and you're no good at art. And it's like really sad, to be honest, seeing him get pushed down for his talents and other things that he does. But he learns that what all those other people think doesn't really matter. All that matters is what God thinks of him. Like, this is the best implication of God ever. It's showing that God sees you as this wonderful person with big future and big hopes. And that can really push someone to do better, to do good things. It's such a wonderful message. And all in all, a really great episode with a really great silly song, Sport Utility Vehicle. All in all really a great episode. And with that, on to the next one. Sumo of the Opera. This one is about perseverance, and first off, once again, great message. In this one, there's actually 3 stories, which I absolutely love. The first one being basically like a mix of Laurel and Hardy and Three Stooges, with Larry, Jerry, and Mr. One as the Three Stooges. And they're trying to like put this big piano up a big flight of stairs. It's like this huge, comically huge flight of stairs on hills. It's like so funny. It's really great, little short, and for the most part it's silent. It's really good. It's really funny. And then the second story is basically the story of St. Patrick, which is interesting because there really hasn't been many shows that have covered that topic. And Veggietales being like one of, if not the first one to do that, that's amazing. That's fantastic. It's really great to see the type of stuff that they're willing to do. And then the silly song, amazing. It's the one that has the pronoun in it. Because, well, pronouns are actual grammar. You know, I, he, she, they, they're all pronouns. It's literal grammar. And, you know, it's like, why would you argue the fact of grammar, like literal grammar, like that? And for all the people that are like, oh, I thought you just said they is a pronoun. Oh, I lost respect for them. Really? You lost respect for a grade A kids show, a family show even. You know, a grade A family show, just because it had a bit where they said that they is a pronoun being inclusive. Really? That is obvious bigotry right there, but still. Anyways, main story is a mix of like Rocky and the Karate Kid, mixed in with a bit of Gilbert and Sullivan musicals. All that put together is just amazing. It's such a good, fun episode. It's all in all a great episode, great message. All in all, wonderful, perfect. It's really good, high quality. And with that, on to the next one. Duke and the Great Pie War. This one is a very interesting episode with the message about loving your family. What's very interesting about this one is the second story. The first one is a pretty simple retelling of the story of Miriam and Moses, with Moses ended up being picked up by the queen and everything. It's a pretty simple retelling of the story with some humorous changes to it. With the silly song being very funny, being about basically Larry trying to sing the blues, yet he's too happy to. It's a very good, funny concept for a silly song with Larry. But the main story is absolutely amazing, to be honest. I'm pretty sure there's a retelling the story of Ruth, basically being about how true love is quite different than what we would think it is. You know, true love you think is like, oh, love at first sight. Oh, it's, you know, all the normal gushy fairy tale stuff. This is still a fairy tale type of story, but they do the true love thing totally different. And I love how they say it in the two singing parts. True love is the kind of love that thinks of others first, mainly. Like, that is just pure beauty. Just, it's simple but beautiful. A great message, all in all, just wonderful. And it's also very funny too. It has Evan Costello a bit. Literally a full-on reference to who's on first, what's on second, I don't know who's on third. It's beautiful. It's such a great episode. I very highly suggest this, especially because of the message. All in all, great episode. And with that, on to the next one. Minnesota Cuke and the Search for Samson's Hairbrush. This one is a very fun episode, first off. The main story being a parody of Indiana Jones. The first story being, like, both stories about bullies and dealing with them, which both are actually really good lessons on how to handle them. The first one is with Junior going against this bully character Gordon, which in this one he like, is a very interesting message. It's about turning the other cheek, basically how you should not be afraid to stand up against them and say, hey, you shouldn't do that, and you're not going to bother me by doing that, and they should leave you alone after that. It's a pretty decent message of handling with a bully. That's fairly solid. And then the second story being about how Minnesota is tired of Rattan always stealing the things that he's going after and everything, and wants back at him. And so, with him searching to find Simpson's hairbrush, he also is on a bit of a journey of revenge, wanting to get back at him for all the mean things that he's done to him. Like, with one of my personal favorite jokes of the episode, how he swapped his gummy worms for real worms, and I didn't know until after I ate them. Ugh. It's like such a good, weird joke. And that story is basically about how if you try to get back at a bully, it only makes you a bully too. Which is honestly a good message. You know, like, wanting to get back at someone is a common thing. But if you do try to get back at a bully, it only makes you a bully too. Like, that is such a good message. And with this one, it has the classic silly song, Pete's Angel. Basically, Larry is thinking about how he's late for his pizza delivery is late. It's a very fun little song. And with that, on to the next one. Lord of the Beans. This with a message of using your gifts. This one is obviously a parody of Lord of the Rings. And this is such a hilarious episode. So many good little nods to the source material, plus some other fantasy things that they reference. It's all really, really good. And the character that they have as Golem, or in this one, his name is Ahem. Basically, it's hilarious because they go really all out with it. It's very silly, it's very funny, and a really good message. All in all, great episode. Not really much to say about it, but it's fantastic. It has some really great jokes, and one of my favorite silly songs, my BBL. And with that, on to the next one. Sherlock Holmes and the Golden Ruler. This episode is just fantastic. It's about being a good friend, friendship. The first one is basically a parody of The Man of La Mancha, being about Don Quixote. It's a very fun concept for that. With it basically being about friends being there for one another. It's a pretty good simple message, but done really well. Then the silly song Gay Community is purely hilarious. I mean, can I have my ball? Can you get my ball? I kicked it into the tree. It's simple but funny. And then the main story being Sherlock Holmes and the Golden Ruler. Also, I love the name because he does he solves all the cases by sheer luck. Pretty good, funny little joke for the character. And there's fish and chips with their running gag. Move along, nothing to see here. It's pretty good little running joke within that segment. It's a really funny episode all in all, and I also love the mention of the Golden Ruler and everything. Which the Golden Ruler says, treat others the way you want to be treated. Which, yeah, is a great thing regarding friendship, or just anybody in general. Also, the countertop scene in this one, the main countertop scene in this one, absolutely hilarious. Larry's just constantly dissing on Minot and South Dakota. It might not be perfect, but it should be South Dakota. It's just hilarious. All in all, great episode. And with that, on to the next one. Larryboy and the Bad Apple, a lesson in fighting temptation. This one's a very fun one too, mainly because it's basically a Spider-Man parody. Spider-Man was very big around that time, around this time, like Spider-Man 2. So, yeah, this one is very Spider-Man 2 based, with little hints of Batman in it still. But yeah, it's all in all really great episode, really great message. The main best part of this is the main best part of this is the villain, the Bad Apple, who's like this seductress type of character. It's a very interesting type of character for Veggietales, and the person who does the voice of the Bad Apple did an amazing job. I really must admit. I really love how they ended up doing it. The villain song, Temptation, is really good. And, this is just all a really great episode. And, I'm not surprised that this is the episode that got video games made out of it. It makes sense. Yeah, I will actually be covering those in this video. This big video. So yeah, stay tuned for that. Yeah, all in all, this is just great, pure, really great episode. Very funny, very fun, very silly, but still very action-centric with it too. It's just, all in all, great. And with that, on to the next one. Gideon Super Warrior. This one, the countertop scene is very fun because it starts off with the pirates don't do anything, basically trying to take over the show. With it not going necessarily the best as they planned because, well, they didn't really plan that far ahead. It's very good and very funny for the beginning part. The first story is the story of George Mueller, a guy who didn't ask anyone for anything, and he's actually a real person. So doing their own little version of that is actually pretty interesting. And then the main story is basically the story of Gideon from the Bible, but with the twist that it's sort of like Gideon was part of a marching band and his brothers are like football players. It's a fun little twist with the characters. And with this one, Gideon is trying to trust that God can do what he says. It's a pretty interesting moral. And the episode's really funny too. The silly song, which is Lance the Turtle, is great. But it's very funny. Has lots of good little jokes. Yeah, it's all in all just a really, really great episode, must admit. So yeah, with that, on to the next one. Mo and the Big Exit. This is a sequel to the Ballad of Little Joe. This one basically being the story of Moses. It's also that plus the story of the Lone Ranger. It's honestly hilarious. Very fun, very interesting episode. The characters in it, Larry as Mo, and all that is just great. And the silly song, I Must Down Egypt, being more of a rap, more like an Egyptian pop type of song. It's interesting, but it works really well, to be honest. And it's just all in all a fun episode. It's just really great, really funny. I mean, the countertop has a joke where there's basically getting spam mail. Bob asks, "Who's screening your mail?" So it was like, I don't know. It's pretty funny. And this one has some great Western style music too. It's all just really good. So yeah, not really much to say on this. Just it's really, really good. So with that, on to the next one. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. This one's a very interesting one because it's the story of the prodigal son merged with Wizard of Oz. It's a very fun episode, and the way that the two stories go together is honestly astounding how similar they are. With the main difference being, it's about one running away when you're just being taken somewhere else. But anyways, yeah, it's a very fun, interesting episode. Larry is the Tin Man, Mr. Lion is the Scarecrow, and Podgrape as the Lion. And all of them wanting to do stuff regarding this carnival place called the Land of Oz instead of wanting a brain, courage, or heart. It's a very funny take on it. And all in all, it's a very funny episode. With my personal favorite bit being, my personal favorite bits actually being that his name is Darby and he's our hero song. And follow Old Yellow Brick Road. I absolutely love that. Instead of the Yellow Brick Road, it's Old Yellow Brick Toad. Like, that's beautiful. Just purely beautiful how it's done. It's just such a great episode. Very fun, very funny. And the silly song, Monkey, basically Larry teaches us about the biology of primates. Saying if something has a tail, then it's monkey, but if it doesn't, it's an ape. And he takes it literally with like everything. Like a kite is a monkey, pillows and ape. It's funny. It's really a funny, silly song. All just a great episode, all in all, just wonderful. And with that, on to the second movie, actually. The Pirates Don't Do Anything, a Veggietales movie. See, this is the second movie that came out within the franchise. And currently the last one, but I am hoping that they make another one. After the new Veggietales show series is over, like, as a big finale of the series, the whole franchise, having one last episode, having one last movie, that'd be like a big grand finale for such a big series, for such a big accomplishment. Yeah, this one is basically about the Pirates Who Didn't Do Anything, Larry, Mr. and Podgrape as Elliot, Cedric, and George, respectively, out on this big time-traveling adventure to help save a princess of a country called Monteria, to save the prince and princess. Basically, the princess is trying to save her brother from her evil uncle while their father is away. And then search for heroes to save everything. And the pirates didn't do anything, end up being chosen. And they think that they're not really the heroes. Like, they're nothing like heroes at all. Elliot is scared of everything. George is a total wimp and pushover. And Cedric is very lazy. And that's sort of all, and that's their growth that happens during the movie. It was Cedric learns to be less dependent on his labor-saving devices, and Elliot learns to not be as scared of everything. He gets over some of his fears, and George learns to not be as much of a pushover, to be a bit braver about things. You know, it's pretty solid messaging regarding the characters. Each one going through their own little arc is very fun. Story is a slight bit complex, but I think that's a good thing for this, because the complexity brings more intrigue to the movie. So yeah, it brings a lot more intrigue, and you're like, huh, I wonder what will happen next then, with it being so interesting, so complex. You know, it's one that I actually would really highly suggest too. You know, it's a wonderful episode, really great, really funny. This movie, not episode, but it's really great, really funny. The music in it and score is just fantastic once again. Just all in all, really great. Now on to the next episode. Tomato Sawyer and Huckleberry Larry's Big River Rescue. This, as the title would suggest, is Veggietales' take on the story of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. It's a very fun little take on it. With Tom and Huck basically trying to get this felon Big Jim back down the mighty Mississippi to St. Louis to meet his mama. Because, you know, he's been wrongly accused of crimes that he did not commit. And that's basically the whole story. It's simple but effective. And the message about helping others. And the way that they do this message specifically is astounding. You know, it's basically saying that if you see someone that needs help and you don't help them, like, sometimes not helping someone can be the same as hurting them. Like, that is such a good addition to the simple, helping others is good type of message. You know, it adds more by saying that sometimes if you don't help someone, it can be the same as hurting them. You know, so it's rather interesting having that extra bit to it. And all in all, just a fun episode. Really good. Highly suggest it. On to the next one. Minnesota Cuke and the Search for Noah's Umbrella. This one is a fun sequel to Minnesota Cuke and the Search for Samson's Hairbrush. This time the villain is Ratan's brother, Wicker, which is less like an evil twin brother trope. It's overdone, but was fairly funny in this one. So in this one, Minnesota Cuke is scared of doing stuff that'll make people laugh at him when he's going on his adventures, because he's always tired of people laughing at him. So he swears that he's not going to do anything silly or goofy for now on, and on this one mission that he's doing to find Noah's umbrella, he is basically having to do these fairly silly things, but the whole message is about not being afraid to do what's right while others are around, even if they are silly. Even if it's silly. It's a really nice little message, and it's just all in all, great episode, great message, just really good. I highly suggest this one, to be honest. It's a really great one. Yep, not really much to say on this one. But yeah, with that, on to the next one. Abe and the Amazing Promise. This one is an interesting one about patience. And also just an extra little weird added thing. This is the only episode that has this little extra tagline that says values to grow by. It's weird that this is the only DVD that has that little extra tagline to it. Like, literally no other episodes around this time at all had that little tagline. Very interesting. But yeah, it's... Anyways, the first segment is Blunders in Boo Booville, which is a nice sort of musical little bit where it's about learning to wait on while you're working on something, taking your time to do things right. It's honestly a pretty good message to do with some really catchy music in it. You know, with if I am willing to wait, my work will be great. With patience, to do things right. It's very nice, fun, simple story. Which is actually not the first story, it's actually the second one to the show, which is interesting. The main one being Junior and Bob doing, using their imaginations to make this autobiography type of video about Abraham and the story of how he gave birth. It's like how he started, his whole story. It's honestly pretty interesting. It's very interesting, very fun, especially with a running joke when, like, since they're doing this whole stage crew, of course it has to be a nurse. So whenever they say patience, like, she's like, patience? And, you know, it's funny little play on words. You know, patience, you know, very silly, very fun. So yeah, all in all, pretty decent episode. Not one of the absolute best, but pretty good one. And with that, on to, well, the next one's actually going to be the last one of the 2000s. So yeah, let's get into that. St. Nicholas, A Story of Joyful Giving. This one is one of the most interesting Veggietales episodes, I must admit. Like, this one, the main story is basically telling the true story of the actual St. Nicholas, aka Santa. It's something that is like not really known or talked about as much as it definitely should. And I'm glad Veggietales did talk about it in this episode. And it was very informative. They definitely do their own things with it, but it's definitely informative to show more so how St. Nicholas actually came to be, how he was a real person. It's actually quite amazing that this was the case. It's really great, I must admit. Just a really great, fun little episode. The music, once again, is fantastic. With this song being an interesting one called Donuts for Benny. It's a very interesting one, but I really like this episode all in all. It's just all in all a really great episode, really funny, to be honest. But like, it's very funny, very interesting. It's all in all really great. Well, with that, on to the second intermission. Enjoy. Hello everybody, and for this intermission, I'm actually going to do something like talking about two of the video games that was released based on one of the episodes, Veggietales, the Larryboy episode, Larryboy and the Bad Apple. I mentioned it a bit earlier, so yeah, these are the two games that were released for it. I'm going to be talking about the Game Boy Advance one first, then the PlayStation 2. So the Game Boy Advance game is sort of like Donkey Kong 94 in concept. you are going around these stages, doing these little puzzles. It's a pretty fun game, and still it's like really good for a licensed kids game of all things. Like it's honestly pretty good. It's has some really decent platforming. Instead of the villains harming you, they have each villain has these little effects that they do. One of them like slows you down. The other one reverses your inputs. It's really interesting how they end up doing it, and both are just like really good high quality little games. And I just really enjoy this one specifically because it's like very simple in its base. You know, it's a simple platformer, nothing really too huge and special, but still like something that's really good and really grand for the series, since you know these two games are the only games that were released for console on like regarding Veggietales. So it's like pretty special seeing these, you know, being put on here, like seeing these be made. And this one is a pretty good one. It follows the story fairly decently with the only character that was from the episode that was returned properly for the whole area and everything was Petunia. The other, well, and Larry's too, but May Blueberry didn't return in this one for some reason. Like it really wouldn't have been that hard, I think, but whatever, I suppose. On to Larryboy and the Bad Apple for the PlayStation 2. This one is actually really interesting, because this also has clips from the actual episode in it, and that's like really cool. You know, and the game animations look pretty close to the animation from the show. But it's looking a tiny bit more blocky, and the mouse movements not being as per usual, but other than that, it looks like really close to the quality of the show, which, you know, is surprising. The manual here isn't like super detailed, but it's still like a really nice little detail, like detailing some of these things, like some of the villains and such. You know, it's like not the most detailed. The game itself is a very simple 3D platformer type of game. Yeah, it's definitely not bad for sure, but it's just very interesting. This one follows the story a lot better, with it. This time, the last one ended in Larry's Temptation. Well, this one started in Larry's Temptation, which the one in this one makes more sense. Yeah, it's basically Larry going around to find people and like basically stopping the temptation. So yeah, the characters they added were Fire Marshal Grape and Baker Want. Like, they were added to it to extend the game time, which understandable. It's with it being fairly simple, but only having 3 stages, just does make sense. But this one also has like this really cool big hub world of Bumbleberg. It's really cool. Yeah, the 2 added characters, Fire Marshal Grape and Bigger One. Here are the descriptions of the characters here. Fire Marshal Grape is in charge of Bumbleberg's fire department. It's his duty to remove the spider webs throughout the city, but his great love of toys and toy collecting could possibly get in the way. Basically showing what his temptation is and, his input into the story. Makes sense. And Baker Lunt. Baker Lunt has the important job of making the cake for Bumbleberg's 300th birthday celebration, and between his episodes of Galactic Commando, he works hard to finish up his baking masterpiece. But will the Bad Apple use his love of space movies against him? It's, once again, pretty interesting. And I also, love all the different worlds that, the different temptation worlds. This episode is, perfect for is absolutely perfect for a video game. The first world is, this big candy world. Is really cool looking. And then the second one is this mansion with a coal mine underground. It's just, really interesting and it's, really cool. The third one is, basically inside a video game console, which is, a really cool concept. It's something that's really cool, really enjoyable there. Next one is, basically this sort of toy world, but it's also, it's this medieval toy world. It's really cool with it having a volcano, with, with stuff like that. It's a big night castle, stuff like that. It's very interesting. And then the last one, is this sort of Star Wars spaceship theme. It's a really cool setup, and then and as you move along in the game, you get more and more abilities and such. And at the very end, you end up fighting the Bad Apple, going around Bumbleberg to spray the different parts of her web to stop her. It's a nice way of accumulating every bit of what you've done in the game for one big final boss battle. And it ends up being pretty cool. It ends up being a very cool, fun game. It's quick, but good. I really highly suggest these games. They're not perfect, but for licensed kids games, they're really good. I really must admit, they are good quality stuff for licensed kids games. So yeah. Very nice little fun stuff. So yeah, and with that, on to the 2010s with the final 17 episodes. Yeah, we're in the end shot here. We're in the final stretch. So let's do this. Now to start up the 2010s, we have Pistachio, the little boy that wouldn't. This one is pretty simply a parody of Pinocchio, with it being about listening to your parents. A pretty simple, easy message. One that's really, this episode just ends up being really enjoyable. It does a good version of Pinocchio, with the changes that they make are fitting or just funny. My personal favorite being that everyone has funny Italian names like Gelato, Parcheesi, it's Dorito. There's a bunch of funny little names like that. And Khalil makes a return as Cricket, even though he's a part caterpillar. It's really funny. Which is all in all a very funny episode. And a very good take on the story of Pinocchio, with a really great message on listening to parents. And the villains in this one are pretty good. It's the Scallions and Charlie Pincher as Purina the Fox and Confetti the Fox and Purina the Cat, which Purina's a joke on the cat food brand. And Shreddy Pincher is like a carnival junkie type of character. All in all, and they have just like a great villain song, You Know Enough. If you haven't seen the song at least, check it out. It's definitely good. It starts off as this like very carnivalesque villain song with like accordion, violin. It's really good. It starts out as really good villain song. It ends up merging with a sweet song about a father trying to find his son. And both of those put together at the end, it gets swapped from between the two, is so great. It's such a good villain song alone. And all in all, it's just a really great episode, really funny, really good message, and all in all, just really good, really fun. And with that, on to the next one. Up next, we sadly have the very worst episode of the series, Sweetpea Beauty. Yeah, I hate to say this, but this is the one episode I would ever call bad. Like, the message that they do in it has good hurt in it, but isn't done well whatsoever. It's supposed to be about inner beauty, but it ends up just being shallow and just ends up being a bad episode all in all. The first segment being a take on Cinderella being Snooderella. Like, that idea actually I think could make a good full episode. And that I just think could have been extended more, and they could have done a lot more with the Snooderella concept, much more rather than the Sweetpea Beauty, because that one just turned out to be not good with the message. Both just turned out, the message just turned out to be still very vain, even though it's supposed to be about inner beauty. And the animation is god awful. Like, really, it's worse than the ones in the 90s. Like, I really gotta say that. It's absolutely awful. It's unfinished. It looks exactly like one of the test animations for Duke the Great Pie War. Like, there's so many animation mistakes. Like, there's so many little animation mistakes, like, sometimes there's these imperfections on the main villain, the Cream Blueberry. Sometimes the imperfections are, like, off. They're the one that she used to have. You know, so like it's progressing more, but sometimes it's the one previously. It's like so bad. It's such bad animation. Like, this is the one episode I would say to completely avoid. There actually is a video on YouTube by he was part of this channel called TAS Productions, who did this big series called Veggietales Live and Reloaded. Well, no, it's Veggietales Abridged, that type of thing. Live and Reloaded Abridged type of thing. But yeah, he has like a new channel, and he made a full video talking about how bad this episode is. I would highly suggest you check that video down below, because I could do like a full 30-minute hour video just talking about how shit this episode is. And he does a way better job in way less time than I ever could. So yeah, this is a really bad episode. Ugh. And with that bad taste, let's get on to the next one. Oddly enough, with this one, the one that's right after the very worst one is the very best one. It's A Meaningful Life. This is the best episode of Veggietales, in my opinion. It has such a beautiful message. The way the story is done is wonderful. It still has some entertaining, funny moments without it taking away from the seriousness of the story and the lesson. This episode, all in all, is perfect. It is the absolute best episode of the series. As the title suggests, it's Veggietales' take on It's a Wonderful Life. And instead of the story being, the story is much less darker than the original, where in the original, the main character wishes he was never born. This one, the main character wishes that he caught a football, so his life could be completely different than how it is now, because he seems to be unhappy with his life. And he realizes that that big, rich life he wanted may not have been exactly what he really wanted. With him being, being big, rich, and famous, he's still miserable because he never got his wife that he loved. He never got his daughter that he adopted. It's such a good episode, and it even makes me tear up. It's such a good episode. There's only one other episode that does it, but that's for a different reason. But this is such a good episode. It makes me cry every time I even think about it. It's just so perfect. It's such a good episode. Compared to Sweetpea Beauty, I do a full hour video on how wonderful, how perfect this episode is. And that's a lot harder for me. It's easy to say what's bad about something, but it's harder to say what's perfect about something. How can something that was made by the studio that I love, and this series I love so much, how can they make one episode that's absolutely perfect? It's hard to say. But this episode is purely beautiful, and with a message about how everyone's life has meaning, is perfect even for people of the LGBTQ community, people who are on the autism spectrum, whoever. It's a great message for anybody and everybody. It's a message that everyone needs to know, that your life has meaning. It's just such a wonderful, beautiful episode. The music in it is fantastic. It's just beautiful. All of it is beautiful. I'm speechless on how wonderful it is. It's really that good of an episode. But I can really top that, but let's move on. On to the next one. Up next, 'Twas the Night Before Easter. This one is interesting because it's not bad, but the whole story is basically a ripoff of The Star of Christmas, oddly enough. It takes the whole base story of someone wanting to do this big musical production with big things in it, for Star Christmas lights. This one is a giant robot bunny, and they steal something. In this case, someone. So this one they took Seymour's advice. Why don't we kidnap him? That was one of the lines from Star Christmas. Yeah, this one they kidnapped someone instead. But yeah, it's after the production, the whole place is destroyed. The whole theater was destroyed. It basically is the same beats as Star of Christmas, but it's not bad. It's definitely still a pretty decent episode. Just that it's a knockoff makes it a bit more on the okay side, but still, it's pretty good. It has some decent humor. The music's still pretty good. And it's just, on all, still fairly decent. And with that, on to the next one. This next one is a very interesting one to talk about. It's Princess and the Pop Star. This is basically Princess Popper merged with Hannah Montana. It's a mix that you didn't think would make sense, but it does. It's two stories that you think would not mix whatsoever, but yet it does. A girl who it's based about how you should be fine with the life that you have. Basically, a girl who lives on a farm and a pop star who look exactly the same switch lives, and they see how each other's lives aren't as good as they thought they were. And they see how special their lives really are. It's honestly an odd way of doing it, but it also talks a bit about these child stars too. It actually does do a good job talking about the issues of having a child star, like having a little kid being this big singing pop star sensation. She ends up not having a life of a normal kid, and she wishes she, had a bit more of a normal life. She has to learn to communicate that with her mom. It's honestly a really interesting way of having this put all together with stories. It's honestly a really good episode, and all in all, it's just pretty good. A really surprisingly good episode. Like, a lot to the contrary of what the people have said about these girl-centric episodes, I actually think most of them are pretty good. All except for Sweetpea Beauty. But, yeah. All of the others, pretty much all the others, I think are pretty good. So, yeah. With that, on to the next one. The Little Drum Boy. This is, simply put, just a retelling of the Rick and Bass animated special, but it's done in its own original way. The music in it is the best part, I really must say. Like, the original songs that they have in it are just fantastic. They're just a lot of fun songs. My personal favorite being I Can't Smile Without You. It's just a really good song about how the main character is very unhappy and no one else can really seem to make him happy like he wants. And the only people who can seem to make him happy are the animals that he has as his friends. It's just, all in all, a really great Christmas episode. A really fun retelling of the story with its own fun takes on it. It's just very fun. Another thing with this one, too, is the silly song. It's actually the April Who's Christmas, which is oddly enough from an old Veggietales Christmas album. A Very Veggie Christmas. That I find to be very weird because, it takes that silly song and basically just animates it. Like, there are some small differences apparently, but, to me it's all the same. It's weird. Just weird. But hey, that's the one odd thing about this one, but all in all, it's a really good episode. And with that, on to the next one, which is If I Sing a Silly Song. This one is the most interesting of the silly song music ones that they've done, because not only is it different, it's still a top 10 silly song type of thing, like the silly song, Ultimate Silly Song Countdown, but this one is different, because it also has this little mini story of them having this telethon going on what the next song is going to be about. It's honestly pretty interesting. And the ones that they have featured, the silly songs I have featured, are honestly really good ones. I really did like how this one turned out. This is actually one of the older DVDs I had. I had it since it was released. Yeah, it's honestly a pretty interesting episode, and one I really like. It's interesting, it's fun, it has some really good silly songs in here. None that I would say are outright bad. Then, like, there are a few that I wish were in there, but other than that, there has some pretty good selections. Which, yeah, it's really good, and I highly suggest it. Simple, easy, and just pretty good. If you want to know the silly songs, this is the one you should do in order to get to know them well. Pretty easy. Robin Hood and His Not So Merry Men. This one is a very interesting one, and one of the most interesting things about it is that it's starting a sort of trend with Veggietales. Basically, around this time, like starting with this episode on forward, they redid a lot of their morals in different ways, which is interesting. And this one is definitely the one that started it, I'd say. So yeah, this one is about handling her, which is basically the same lesson as Little Joe. But these two do it in very interesting ways. Like this, the first story is Lenny and the Lost Birthday, and it's a pretty good little storybook type of tale about Junior Spirits, who's Lenny LeBeau, who seemed to have who everyone seemed to forget about his birthday. He's just really having a bad day, and it's honestly like a pretty interesting story. And it even has a good little life lesson regarding leap years. It's an interesting thing to add in the episode. And then the other one, main one, Robin Hood, is, obviously a parody of Robin Hood. And in this one, Robin basically is stealing, basically, instead of stealing from the rich, actually, and giving to the poor, they're fundraising from the rich and giving to the poor. Because it's good. Robin Good. It's honestly like a pretty interesting twist on it. And his merry men end up being like, no, we had enough fundraising. Let's steal from them instead. And they decided to steal because instead of giving people money, they give them ham. Because the leader, the Prince John, basically hoards a whole bunch of ham. It's very funny. It's very fun. And the lesson, all in all, is done pretty well about handling hurt and how your family and friends can be there for you while you're dealing with it. It's honestly a really good message, and one I would definitely highly suggest. And with that, on to the next one, and we're down to the last 9 episodes. So yeah, on to the next one. The Penniless Princess, a lesson in true worth. This one is definitely a very interesting one too. This one is basically the same type of moral as It's Meaningful Life, kind of. Basically saying how everyone's life has worth for the most part. That's basically what the message is. But I definitely like how this episode is. The only other like one of the only other people I've seen that has reviewed this episode, which I am not going to discuss them. That I'm actually going to save for my third one on one of the intermissions, because that is going to be an interesting topic. But anyways, yeah, the only other person that has reviewed this said that the main character is a Mary Sue, which isn't true. Mary Sue's are characters who are absolutely perfect no matter what. She is definitely not absolutely perfect. You know, he definitely views her being absolutely perfect as her just being super, super nice. Like, she's just a very nice, sweet, caring person. That's not Mary Sue, not whatsoever. So yeah. But, and this one is the only other episode that has ever made me cry. It's mainly because the main character's father, who's played by Larry, ended up dying, like full on dying. Like we don't see it, but it's said that he's full blown dead, and all her riches are gone because of that. Like it's so sad, and that's when the episode becomes much more darker and sadder, and it's very interesting. And but the one downside to this episode whatsoever is a silly song, Best Friends Forever. This is absolutely the worst silly song ever. Yeah, it is just awful. I absolutely hate the silly song, and it's mainly because the silly song is basically just texting, and that's it. And it was outdated. It's all outdated even when it was released. It was just bleh. But other than that, it's a pretty good episode. And with that all done, on to the next one. The League of Incredible Veggietales. This one is a very fun episode, definitely. It's basically a parody of the Avengers with Larryboy and a whole bunch of new superheroes. It's pretty fun. And the main story is lessons about handling fear, which is what the very first episode was based on. Which this one actually does a pretty good job on it too. It basically does the same type of lesson that the first episode did, but in a much more fun way. And the other superheroes are just very fun too, and the main character of it being more Junior Asparagus, who's learning to be a superhero and learning that he doesn't need to be afraid. It's not just because of his new super suit. He doesn't need to be afraid because of God. It's pretty interesting way of doing it. And he dons the costume Ricochet along with Mr. Lunt as Escape, Petunia as Vogue, and Bob as Thingamabob. Like, out of all of them, Thingamabob is like one of the weirdest, but it fits with his sort of superpower of having a whole bunch of like different gadgets. And this also has honestly one of my favorite villains of Larryboy, Dr. Flurry. Him being this sort of German scientist, the German mad scientist type of character. It's a very, very fun type of character. It's one that you really would not expect to see in Veggietales. And it's one that you're surprised that they also didn't do yet. And I really like him, and it's good that he actually has appeared in the new show a few times, and yeah, it's all in all just a really good episode with the silly song Superhero being pretty funny. Yeah. All in all, pretty good episode. And with that, on to the next one. The Little House That Stood. This is actually the last episode to have 2 segments in it. And both of these are like really fun in the concept that they do. They basically mix in parables from the Bible with classic Mother Goose fairy tales. It's very fun, and it's just, all like, it's just a great episode. The first segment being a take on Humpty Dumpty and a whole bunch of other classic fairy tale stuff. With it being Humpty Dumpty's like the mayor, he's very stressed, and all the other people in the little town that he has is becoming overwhelming for him, and his shell's starting to crack because of all his stress. So he tries to go on this vacation just for him to relax, not caring about his neighbors or anything like that. And as he does, and as he goes on this vacation, that's not exactly what he expected, because it's all a vacation that he has to do his own work himself. It's also like a pretty good twist on it. It could be just, him having a nice relaxing vacation the whole time. No, it's him not being that happy, but him still being like, yeah, at least I don't have to worry about all my neighbors complaining. And as he's having that not so great vacation, all the other people, like, everything else is going to havoc. It's a very fun segment. And the second segment being one of the best that Veggietales has done. It basically mixes the parable of the wise man who built his house upon rock and the foolish man who built his house upon the sand, but merged with the story of the three little pigs. Like, that concept just purely is amazing. It's very fun, and I love the twist that they ended up doing with it. Instead of the one being made out of bricks being the sturdiest and one that's passed, it's the one made out of sticks, or in this case, wood. And that's because it was made with a solid foundation, and the one with bricks didn't use any sort of foundation whatsoever. It's just mind-blowing how they were able to do that, like a fun twist on it. And Larry and Miss Lot as the foolish builders are hilarious. Them caring more about getting it done fast and all the cool stuff they have added in theirs, compared to it actually turning out good. It brings a bit of humor in it, and it's all in all just a really good, fun little episode. And with that, on to the next one. McLaren the Stinky Cheese Battle. This is a very fun episode too. This basically having the same lesson as the third episode. Basically just being about getting along with others despite our differences. And the way it's done here is actually done really well. And it also could be taken as a lesson about a father and his son who is part of the LGBTQ community. He is the father is basically trying to push his son to be someone who he's not. His son is an inventor when his father is pushing him to be a prankster. And he's not like that, but his father is having a hard time trying to understand that. He has to learn that he should accept his son for who he is. It's at least my little take on it, but you can take it any way you want, really. It could be any sort of put together type of thing. McLary is supposed to be a sort of multiple types of characters that you can sort of put yourself into. But all done really well. It's all done really well. It's a very fun, silly episode. One of my favorite jokes in it being, basically they're doing this like roll call, and they have like this a whole bunch of like different Mac names, and then last one just being, don't forget Donald, sir. Really, just Donald? No Mac? Nope, just Donald. Like both a joke on Old McDonald and Ronald McDonald or McDonald's. Like that's a good little joke, and like one of the best that they did in this episode. Yeah, simply put, just a really great episode, really good moral. All in all, just really good, really fun. And with that, on to the next one. Mary Larry and the True Light of Christmas. This one, like 12 Night Before Easter, is a lot like the Star of Christmas, but it's still very different at the same time. This one, the story is played out a bit differently, with it being about this one mall elf, Mary Larry, trying to find out what this little girl really needs, really wanted to help her neighbor with for Christmas. So she's doing this big thing trying to help this little girl doing something good. It's honestly a really good message, but it still has the same general message of you don't need flashy lights and all that in order to celebrate Christmas. It's really about giving for others and what the real story of Christmas is about, Jesus' birth. So yeah, it's pretty simple, but a pretty good episode, to be honest. The music in it is really good. The story is fantastic. And I really like how Mary Larry is done here, with him being this sort of childish and optimistic type of character, but still very much so making it so he's likable instead of unlikable. He's not annoying, he's just really determined to do this one good deed, and him having this sort of light, optimistic, childish feel to him really helps make you want to go along with him. It's all in all just a really great episode. And with that, on to the next one. Veggietales in Space, The Final Frontier. This one is basically the same message as Wild the Kind of Viking, but it's done in, once again, its own original way. It's basically about this, and it's also actually a sequel to the third episode segment, The Gorse Must Be Crazy. So it's actually double really interesting type of thing. It takes place on the USS Apple Pies, where basically the crew is having this hard time with sharing, and they're also on a mission to go to this planet called Tutani in order to help with basically the sun is about to go into a big supernova, and they have to go and save it because their sun is basically running out of power, and they need to stop it before it totally incinerates the whole planet. A bit of a dark story, but it's done really well and really interestingly. And this also has so many great sci-fi references in it. One of my personal favorites being a Doctor Who reference. Like, who calls in? Who? That's Doctor Who to you. Now, excuse me, new in the 19th century. Ta-ta! It's very quick, very funny. This one, I just really like the whole sci-fi feel of it. And sci-fi is one that Veggietales actually hasn't done that frequently. And it's done really well in this, having a whole bunch of different, like, Star Wars, Star Trek, and Avatar, so many references to so many sci-fi movies and such. It's done really well, really funny. It's all in all just a great episode. And with that, on to the next one. Silver Night Fever. This one has the same message as the second episode, but still it's like really good. This one, the story I really like in it, it's somewhat of a parody of Saturday Night Fever. I guess I'm not really sure. Like I haven't seen that, but I know the title comparison. But this one, basically the park is about to be torn down by this evil tycoon character, Bruce Onion, and Laura wants to help save it by doing a fundraiser by getting her grandfather's band, the Groovy Brothers, back together. And it's this really good story about forgiveness, and the music in this one is spectacular. This has some of my favorite music in Veggietales. My personal favorite song being the way, like, how it used to be. That song in general is like a really great one, because it does the sort of, because it shows why how Lanny does want things to go back to how it was, but how it's hard for Bob's character. I think it's Dennis. Yeah, Dennis. Yeah, how hard it is for Dennis to go back since he felt so betrayed. It's really good, and how it's even done, like, so suddenly he turns, it's like, oh yeah, I wanted to be back, but wait, I just remembered all the bad things you did. Why did you do that? It's honestly a really good story. Really great music. And yeah, it's all in all just really great. And with that, on to the next one. Beauty and the Beat. This list here is one that actually hasn't been done yet in Veggietales, The Unconditional Love. This one is, for the most part, parody of Beauty and the Beast. You know, it's very fun. Yeah, this is another character that, the main character in this one, has also been like accused of being Mary Sue, but once again, she's just very nice. People just confuse very nice for Mary Sue a lot, I think. But yeah, this one, the story is that that Maribel and her family, who's part of this band, is stuck in the middle of the snow at this hotel. And the owner of the hotel, the Beat, who's actually played by Rob Paulson, yeah, who does a really good job as a character. They're stuck in this rundown hotel, and they basically are trying to bring the popularity back up as they have to work off having to be there, you know, because they don't have much funds for it. It's a pretty simple but really good story. The lesson is fantastic, actually, being on how just because someone may be mean to you doesn't mean you shouldn't still show them love, just like how God shows love to all of us. It's honestly just such a great message. And with that, on to the last episode. The final episode, Noah's Ark. This one being done in the new style, which I actually don't mind the new character designs as much. I got used to it after a while, but yeah. This one's basically retelling Noah's Ark, and the lesson is basically the same as Joshua the Big Wall, and trust in God. But this one I really found the lesson to be done fairly decently. I didn't mind how the story went with them adding a new character to the story to sort of be a straight man to all of this. the main character is Shem, who isn't even on the cover. He's on the back for some reason, but yeah, basically Shem is Noah's son, and he's basically skeptical of all that's going on, and he just wants a happy life with his new wife after they just came back from a honeymoon, and he's very shocked about this new. He's very shocked about the news of the Ark and how the whole world's going to be flooded, and he has to learn that, even though things may sound weird from it, he has to listen to what God says, and it's just, all in all, a fairly simple episode, but still very, very good in my opinion. It's not the best, but it's far from bad. It's still fairly decent. It still has that same Veggietales feel, it has some references that kids won't get as more for adults. It's still fairly good. And with that, on to the outro. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. This honestly took a lot longer than I expected. I expected it to be done way earlier, but thanks for being patient with this. I am so glad with how it turned out. I mean, it's such a big project that this video is probably gonna be over 2 hours, maybe even 3 hours long. So yeah, but in the meantime, the next video I'm gonna do is the 3 Twin Penguins series, covering all those episodes there. It's part of the big idea marathon thing I wanted to do this year. So yeah, but in the meantime with that, please do check out my Twitch, which I will have linked down below. On Twitch, I sometimes do some art, and I've also been playing some games. Recently, I've been playing a lot of the game Kindergarten, and it's been a lot of fun. So yeah, please check out that and my Twitter down below, link down below. But yeah, with that, I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's gonna take me another little bit before I get the 3 Twin Penguins one out, but it definitely won't be as long as the Veggietales. The third one, Veggietales in the House, is definitely gonna take longer though, but I know that, but once again, thanks for being patient with this, and this whole series is gonna be a pretty time-consuming one, but one I've been really happy with how this first part has been. The new series, the Veggietales show one, probably won't be out I probably won't cover that this year, maybe next year, depending on how the duties coming out for the show will be. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one, which will be a bit longer, but hopefully I'll have it done by early March, hopefully. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.